there's a huge number of physicians that are leaving medicine. And it's because of this intolerable burnout that comes from, first of all, no support and this continuous pressure to adhere to some kind of a standard without really understanding that medicine is as much of an art as it is a science.
You're listening to Parallax from Radcliffe Cardiology in association with makeadent.org. Here is your host, Ankur Kalra, MD.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Parallax. This is episode 74, and I am, yet again honored and privileged to have with me Dr. Kavitha Chinnaiyan. She was on the show. We sort of did a mini series in season 1, which was very, very well received, extremely well received. And, time has flown by and we're into season 4. This is episode 74. And I actually have the privilege of having her back again to sort of talk about some of the themes we discussed in the initial mini series on burnout and mindfulness that I did with Kavitha. And, she's such an expert in this sphere of spirituality and medicine that, quite frankly, is peerless in my opinion. But Kavitha is an advanced imaging cardiologist. She's with Beaumont in Michigan, and she's an extremely accomplished and published author. She's written, and you can correct me, Kavitha, if I'm wrong, but at least 3, if not 4. I think her 4th one is coming out, or maybe her 5th one is coming out. I lose track because of how much she writes. She's just prolific in that regard, and she's also a very accomplished, in my opinion, a very accomplished spiritual seeker, and is someone who I look up to as a mentor. And I've had the privilege of actually authoring several papers with her on spirituality and medicine, so exploring that intersection. So with that introduction, Kavitha, welcome on the show, and thank you so much again for doing this for us.
Thank you so much for having me on the show again, Ankur. It's an absolute privilege and honor to be here.
No, it's the privilege and the honor is mine. So the feelings are mutual and shared. So I'm going to start this show by asking you, Kavitha, as to first of all, what really prompted you to explore. You are a clinical cardiologist. You have an expertise in cardiac imaging, particularly cardiac computer tomography. So, very scientific and data-driven and evidence-based, as you and I were just discussing. And then you're also this very accomplished spiritual seeker, and you've written books on spirituality, and you practice spirituality, and that is an equally important, if not more, an important facet of you. So my curious question is, how have you found that path for yourself? And the second question, which is a follow-up question to the first one, is how do you balance modern medicine with that spiritual path that you're seeking for yourself?
That's such a good question. It's for me, it's not contradictory. It's all one and the same. And with regard to how it came to be this way, I can say that my journey I wouldn't even call it spiritual as such, but more an exploration of my inner landscape began in childhood, and it's continued through the years and intensified. And I've had the incredible honor of studying with many teachers in various Eastern traditions. And along the way, as that was going on, in parallel, I went to medical school and then trained in cardiology and imaging and everything else, and began practice. So it has happened kind of together and in parallel. And a lot of times we tend to think that there is this life, this mundane life of work and family and kids and all of this material world. And then there is this separate spiritual world where supposedly we do something there and we do something here, and the two spheres are separate. And it is like that a lot of times for a long time, I would say, and it was for me. And fortunately, because of these incredible beings I have studied with and continue to study with, those spheres, there is no longer a separation. For me, all of life is spiritual. And by that, we really must dissect that word, because a lot of people are turned off by this idea of spirituality. It's like some woo-woo thing somewhere. And that's not it, actually. And here, in quotes, spirituality is simply the understanding that there's something far beyond this visible world and this visible body and the mind, and that there's a greater intelligence. And when we say greater intelligence, it's not necessarily a secular religious thing either. It's a very fundamental thing. For instance, in medical school, I used to think I was really fascinated with embryology. And the question that used to haunt me at the time was, how does that one cell know to differentiate into so many different organs and organ systems? Like, what is that knowledge? What is it that drives it? And then, we would have conversations amongst friends groups and say, well, it is the genetic material, it's the chromosomes, it's the genes, but how do the genes know what to do? I mean, how do the base pairs come together? Or how does that even happen? How does the helix create its own structure? I mean, how are the proteins formed? So there is a fundamental basic intelligence that runs everything, right? And what is that? And that is the curiosity, I think, that really drives a lot of even these Eastern spiritual traditions. It's more an understanding of not necessarily what is out there, but what is in here. And both of those start to come together as we progress on this journey, so to speak. And so that's how it has been for me. And I don't see cardiology practice any different than anything else I'm doing. It's all one and the same. So this informs that informs this. Everything is my practice. So if somebody asks me, what is your spiritual practice? Well, my life is my practice. There's no difference there. How I raise my kids, how I interact in relationships and with patients and colleagues and whatever it may be, that's all part of my practice. Does that make sense? It's a long-winded answer to a very short question.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense, and beautiful answer, and thank you for providing such a detailed answer. And you said that your life is your spiritual practice, and so I'm trying to get into some of the nuts and bolts for someone who's listening and who's wondering, well, how is her life a practice in and of itself? And I'm sure it's taken you, I'm sure that's not it. Like that sentence in and of itself is not a casual sentence. It's got a very deeper meaning to it. I certainly understand it because I know what you're trying to get to is like every action is, is deeply rooted in the practice of mindfulness, and every thought or every karma, as we call it, is a spiritual practice of decoding oneself and decoding one's true chitta, which is your true nature. I mean, chitta I'm preaching to the choir, but this is for the wider listenership. When I say chitta, I mean nature. But for someone who is naive to this concept of mindfulness and spirituality, what does that sentence mean when you said that your life is your spiritual practice?
See, it's a very fundamental question, which is, when we say we're seeking something, right? What is it that all of us are seeking? I mean, why would you want academic success? Why would you want money? Why would you want notoriety? Why would you want to, heal or make people feel better, or whatever it is that we do? Not only in this profession, well, here we, do procedures and read studies and see patients and prescribe and do procedure or surgeries or whatever it is. But you may as well be, mowing the lawn or doing something else, or taking care of your pantry and throwing things out. Why do we do anything that we do? And the fundamental question here is that, which is, what are we doing? What is it that we are seeking? And these traditions tell us, all traditions pretty much tell us, that what we are seeking is really lasting happiness. So it's not really a big surprise. It's not really any big, words we need to use. All of us are seeking happiness. And how do we define happiness? Well, it is the state of feeling content, like nothing more is needed. Because at all times, we are always driven by, I need something more. There is a fundamental sense of lack that drives all of us, whether it's ambition for academic success, or for more money, or for more fame, or whatever, whoever you can think of. In every field, everybody is seeking that contentment. And this tradition tells us actually that there is no difference between somebody who's a saint or a sinner. Everybody is seeking happiness in their own way. And when I say my life is my practice, it is merely, first and foremost, cultivating awareness of my own patterns. How am I responding to this? Do I have freedom really from my own patterns? So here is this stimulus that is in front of me by way of somebody saying something, or it could be a sensory stimulus, it could be a political or a very mundane, or my child saying something, or an argument or not, or a very benign or pleasant thing. Whatever it is, there is a stimulus. And do I have the freedom to respond to it every single time in absolute spontaneity, where I'm not conditioned by what I know about the situation? Can I respond to life in every moment as if this is a brand new thing, that I'm going to embrace it absolutely in its fullness without rejecting any parts of it, whether it is my own pain or whether it is pleasure or any of these dualities? So that is the tradition that I come from, where life becomes a spiritual practice, because you are seeking that stimulus to cultivate ever deepening awareness of your own, billions of responses that are going on at any given time. Most of us are very, a lot of these billions of responses are cut off because we kind of get into a groove. We know this is how it is. You have interacted with this person before. In the past, they did this. So next time you meet them, whatever happened in the past is going to condition how you're going to look at them, how you're going to interact with them. But this tradition says, can that be erased, where you meet every person, every moment, every instance of life as if you are not primed by it? And that can only happen when you have worked through all of your own patterns and all of your own hang-ups and all of your own issues. So here, when I say life is practice, it is really living life while being completely inward turned, where, I'm completely aware of what is going on in my inner landscape, the chitta, as you said. So that's what I mean by my life is my practice. So in every moment, can I be absolutely authentic and true to this right here, with no projection into the future that doesn't exist, and no condition by the past that also doesn't exist. So neither past nor future exists. All we have is now. And can I be absolutely aligned with this flow of life? And that's what life as practice would mean for me.
Yeah, no, you share some of the concepts that Joe Dispenza shares. I don't know if you know him, but he talks about people with pasts and experiences which are not pleasant, and he works with several of of the people who've had tough experiences in their lives, and that's something which you eloquently said and put through for the listenership was that you do not get conditioned by the past, and you sort of are not projecting into the future, and you are seeking control of how you respond to the stimulus. And so one of the I would say challenges maybe is the right word. Yeah, I think it is a challenge, and I'm sure to people who are listening who are either naive or have practiced mindfulness and spirituality in their own lives. The challenge here is that how do you let go of the conditioned past? Because I think they're sort of tied together, right? Like the conditioning of the past sort of makes you project into the future with the circumstances that you have in front of you now. Uh, and so it's sort of like a vicious cycle. So how do you break that cycle? And how do you not let past experiences, however pleasant or adverse they may be, not influence the present moment so that you do not project to the future because you have not seen the future. So you may still perform certain actions which are conditioned by the past that you've experienced with this particular situation, whether it's a pleasant situation or whether it's adversarial. And that may actually then have implications on the future. So how do you break that cycle?
So and this is the crux of the matter, right? How do you do that? Because it's insanely difficult. And how do you differentiate between growth? Because that's how you grow, right? You grow from your experience and you learn from experience. I mean, if I touch a hot stove, and burning, burning flames, I'm going to be burned by that. And so I learn not to touch that in the future. And that is a growth, and it's learning. And this is how we acquire information about the world around us. And there is, what I would say is, in this tradition, the most important thing is to cultivate awareness. But along with that awareness comes this increasing ability to discern between things that look the same. So, in the imagers language, it is spatial and temporal resolution. That is how I would describe viveka, or the ability to discern between increasingly finer things. For instance, how do you differentiate between growth and conditioning that holds you captive? They both look alike on the surface, right? But the whole practice here is to have grown from your experience. You take every experience, and this is the whole life is practice business, where every experience becomes a joyful portal to growth, but you end up at the other end of it really innocent and unprimed by it. And unprimed as in, you are willing to go through it again without being jaded by it. So if I have had a bad experience with someone, usually what happens is our senses are turned outward. And since, we you and I have had many conversations about the Bhagavad Gita. If you look at one of my favorite segments of the Bhagavad Gita is the last bit of the second chapter. So verses like 54 to 72. In that, Arjuna asks Krishna, who is this person who is a Sthita Prajna, who is absolutely established in this higher reality? Who is this person who's always still within? And Krishna goes on to describe who this person is. And in that entire segment, the teaching point there is to understand how the senses affect us. So our senses are always turned outward, which means if I have a bad interaction or an unpleasant interaction with someone, our ordinary way of being is to project this hurt and the pain onto the circumstance and say, we may take some responsibility for it and say, well, I had my part to play in it, but we never see it holistically. We always kind of project a little bit and say that person should not have done that. This person should not have done that. That circumstance should have been different. If you look at any conflict anywhere on any level, it comes from this, because we project our senses outward. But the Sthita Prajna, the one who is established in their own sense, and they have this incredible spatial and temporal resolution, I would say, has the ability to take any circumstance and completely internalize it and say, this is happening, whatever is happening, this is for my good. This is actually in my advantage, which is a very difficult thing to do when you are absolutely contracted in pain and fear or whatever these things are. It's very difficult to have that kind of expansive awareness to say, wow, bring it on. Let me understand where my own contractions are. That is the difference, because that is what we're talking about here. When you internalize every circumstance and say, everything is actually happening for my benefit, even when outwardly it doesn't look like that, then you have risen above that. You have risen above these contractions and, cultivated this exquisite awareness of your own internal process without projecting outwardly at all. And the whole point of how do you do that, right, is to understand how the world works, how everything in the universe works, whether we are talking about a subatomic structure or, big things out in space that we have only seen in planetariums and they're not even visible to the naked eye. Everything has the same rhythm or the same method. And understanding that frees us of that. Because when you look at any circumstance, we're all victims of our own conditioning. I behave the way I do because of my experiences. You behave the way you do because of yours. So who's to blame here? Nobody is to blame. So you transcend the blame game entirely. And you'll never see the world again in that projected, blame and shame. And shame, blame turned inward is shame, basically. And you lose the ability to even be contracted in shame when you see that you could not have done anything different. And so when you say how, right, there are many ways to the how. One is through prayer and devotion and giving up and surrendering to this higher power, which is the most difficult thing to do. Actually, it's easier to talk about surrender than to actually surrender. The other is through logic and to see that actually nothing is personal. Everything is impersonal. Nobody's out to get you. Everybody is always reacting to their own stuff. I react to my own stuff, you react to your own stuff, and our reactions interact and get entangled. And so when we understand this through an intellectual level, that is one way. Understanding it through selfless service, where you do whatever it takes, even when it does not serve you. And we do this really well with our families, with our children especially. Even, when it is uncomfortable for me to do something for my child where the child benefits, it's easier for me to do that for my child because I'm attached to my child. But if you bring that same kind of attitude towards others, and in our field, you see this in so many doctors, amazing physicians, where they bring that and say, at the cost of my own well-being, I want to do good. I want to help here. But then you have to rise above that, where you understand that all you can do is your work, and the outcome is never in your hands. So many different ways to the how, but the end result is a complete inward turning of the senses, where the world becomes not a threatening kind of a place, but it's your playground for more growth and more stimulus. And whatever is happening, you take that to be a good thing, happening in your favor.
Yeah, no, that's such a beautiful description. And again, like you said, easier said than done. And, particularly surrendering, surrendering to the universe and sort of talking through every experience, talking to yourself, whether it's adversarial or whether it's pleasant, that this is happening for you. And as as much as I have, personally read it and tried to imbibe that ideology and live by it, I can tell you that as a practitioner, it's very, very hard. It's hard because life will have its troughs and its peaks, and it's easy when it's peak time. It's hard when it's trough time, and that's when these practices or these thought processes or this logical thinking is put to its litmus test, right? Because that's when your true teachings or learnings come into practice. And I really liked when you said two things, that one, that no one is out there to get you, and the world then becomes a playground for more stimulus and more experience. Give me an example, maybe from your own personal journals, or something that you've experienced vicariously, but just give me an example of how you've either practiced that mindset or that learning, or you've
Yeah.
seen maybe your gurus or your mentors or others practice that learning.
Well, I think a very for us in the field of medicine, right? A very relevant example is for me as an imager. It's and especially in this country where we are always worried about litigation, about missing things, and what that may do to us in our careers and how we may look to everybody. And usually there's this thing of where we beat ourselves up because, in quotes, I should have known better. And it doesn't even have to be like, this is why this is what I was saying earlier. This is why life is spiritual practice, because you don't have to look far. In your day-to-day life, there are plenty of such examples. And in mine too, because I'm an imager, there have been times when I have not seen something, and fortunately somebody else has, and they've pointed that out to me and said, can you go back and take a look at this study again that you read? And if I think of myself as a senior imager, okay, and I am accomplished. I have written many papers, including guideline papers, and I'm a professor of medicine, and so on and so forth. It can be very humiliating that, oh my gosh, I actually teach people this. How could I have missed this? And then you take it very personally, right? And say, and especially if we begin with a low self-worth in general, and that has never been addressed directly, and you feel really horrible to have missed something. And of course, there is that, the blow to the ego, but also there is this, oh, did I endanger somebody by having missed this? And but on the other hand, when you grow in self-awareness, you are absolutely aware, first of all of these things that are happening at once. There is the fear of having missed something, there is the humiliation, there is this, and there is that, and the projection into the future and the past, and oh, I've done this before, I suck, whatever it may be. And you know that you are advancing when, if such a thing happens again, you look at it in a very curious, non-attached, and a non-judgmental way. You look at yourself as a third person and say, wow, okay, what can I learn from this? What is the methodology I should improve on? And you do the needful, you look at it, and you understand it's not personal. Nobody was pointing that out to humiliate me. And this is how you grow. You grow as an imager, you grow as a physician, you grow in compassion, and you understand. Because now when I see my own process, if somebody else misses something, I can relate to that. I'm okay with that. I don't judge them because I've lost the ability to judge myself, you see? And you hold space for more and more of this in your life. And you kind of grow in your own, like what you can say in a neo spirituality, in the modern spirituality circles, your aura in quotes is growing. Or very simply, you're simply growing in awareness, and you are not going back and forth. In other words, you have cultivated equanimity. And what you were saying earlier, which is, the peaks and the troughs, and the Bhagavad Gita addresses this. And there is a verse that I just remember all the time, which is Shitoshna Sukha Dukkheshu Tatha Manapamana Yoho. This is basically, it's a description of this person who is established in stillness, whether it is hot or cold, it's praise or insult, if it is pleasure or pain, if it is happiness or sorrow. In all circumstances, they are always content. And you become like a container for everything to pass through you. And so that's a very practical example. And my teacher just is on the extreme of I've seen him actually look for unpleasant circumstances to see how he was going to react to that. Actually seek unpleasant and unpleasurable circumstances to grow in that awareness. For most of us, we just avoid that. He will actually seek that out and go right into it. So there are people like that. And so that is another extreme example. But very practically speaking, what we go through on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, no. So, well, what you said, but the last segment of what you said is so fascinating to me, because I recently read that when I was reading a scripture from Sufism, which basically says that, so a Sufi saint is someone who processes painful or adversarial experiences as true gems, because that's what they're constantly seeking and searching for, because they know that when they get these gems, as they call it, that they are getting closer to um, to their God, or they're getting closer to the central um, energy source of the universe, that they're getting closer to being one with the universal force or the Almighty. And so, if they are devoid of any pain for a much longer duration, they start to question if they are on the right path, which, to me was was rebellious. It was revolutionary, and it's something. So when you said that, I was like, wow. I just read that when I was reading something about Sufism. Um, mm, but how would you explain that to someone in medicine, or maybe someone um, practicing, the modern medicine that we all practice in the United States? And I think is a great segue also for me to then ask you about what you mentioned previously, and that is our focus on the outcome and how that is driving, everyone in circles, whether it's seeking for, higher rankings in US News and World Report, or leapfrog, or what have you, whatever metrics. And I'm not saying that these metrics are not important, or that improving quality is not important, or that um, it's not important to practice safer medicine. I'm absolutely unequivocally not saying that, but just also the contrast then, for you and me, who are seekers of the Gita and have examined it very closely, is the Gita's teaching that you have to focus and only focus on the action, because that is what you're only entitled to, and you're not entitled to what happens afterwards. How do you put this in perspective for someone who's listening, who can then take this back home and start practicing this the next day, or from the very moment that they've listened to this episode?
See, the thing is, the these traditions, or these techniques, they are meant for the particular practitioner to work on themselves. It is never meant um, to be taught to somebody else, and it's only meant to be taught to somebody who really wants to learn that. It's never meant to be forced on anyone else, right? It's really, it's your own personal journey. You go inward with it, and as Mahatma Gandhi famously said, be the change you wish to see. So, and I truly believe that, and this is absolutely what has been instilled in me as well, that when you start changing, the world around you starts changing. This is absolutely 100% true. I've seen this in my own life. I've seen this in the lives of my many students who learned this kind of stuff from me. And without really forcing anything on anyone, just working on yourself is the fundamental thing. And in fact, in the Gita, Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, don't teach this to anyone. This is not for you to share with anyone. If they want, they will find it. And that is absolutely true as well. Now, with regard to, this whole business of metric medicine, this is one of the problems of burnout. Number one, it is a good intention that has gone too far. And obviously, like you, I too believe, and definitely I'm all for safety and for accountability and having a sense of responsibility. But I think corporate medicine has taken it a little too far, causing so much pressure to practitioners and to physicians. And I read recently that um, there's a huge number of physicians that are leaving medicine. And it's because of this intolerable burnout that comes from, first of all, no support and this continuous pressure to adhere to some kind of a standard without really understanding that medicine is as much of an art as it is a science. And there are many things that you can't really measure. There are the immeasurables in medicine, but those immeasurables are the ones that provide quality of life and provide more space and growth and happiness and joy and love and compassion and all of that. You can't measure those things. And the measurables have really taken over the immeasurables, and that's the whole point of this metric medicine. But here too, for me, it has been a fertile ground for practice to see what it is that I need to change or I need to look into within myself, of course. And as I change, make the changes I can, and then with the ones I can't, I have to make decisions and say, this is what I'm willing to do, and this is what I'm not willing to do. And what does that mean? See, the thing is, the reason, and this is a conversation I've had with many of my colleagues, is why is it that we physicians who are incredibly intelligent, incredibly well accomplished, why is it that somebody can, or another group of people can rule over us? Why is that? And it is because one of the reasons for this is we don't want conflict. We don't want to actually come together as a community and say, no, this is not what we're willing to do. And most people just want to just do their thing and go home, and everybody's saying, well, I have 10 more years until retirement. I have 15 more years. Why do I want to get involved in all this? I don't want to do this. And anytime we want to make a change, we have to be willing to give up something. And in the community of physicians, maybe that we, the critical mass of physicians is not willing to give up the comfort of retirement or the comfort of knowing they have a job, this job security or something, by coming together as a community and saying, this is not how we want to practice medicine. And so, because we are not willing to do that, we become the players for people that have the power, because we don't want that power in terms of what it might cost us. And so that is how it is in life, right? If you want something, you have to be willing to give up something. And here, we are not willing to give up what it may mean in terms of job security to fight this greater issue, which, when you look at the Gita and the Mahabharata war, ultimately that's what it is, dharma and adharma. You must fight whatever that is going to cost you, but then are we willing to do that? That's the point.
Yeah, and sadly, the answer to that is no. I mean, it's nowhere else we wouldn't be here, right?
Yes.
But no, I think that's a great note to end the show on, and for people to take this back home and ponder on dharma, and which obviously you and I know, but I'm hoping that people can look up what that means and I'm going to put a shameless plug on one of the manuscripts we both wrote together in the European Heart Journal at the onset of the pandemic, which unfortunately still continues. And it's called COVID-19 and healthcare workers. And if anyone who's interested can Google that and Google either my name or Kavitha's name, you'll find that. And we've briefly mentioned the meaning of the word dharma tried to contextualize it in modern medicine, ideologies and terminology. So, but Kavitha, thanks again for teaching me. Each time I have this privilege of having you on the show and talking to you for that long, I always learn something new. So it's always great to have you and to learn from you.
Thank you so much for having me here and for doing this on topics that are difficult. And these are not, regular topics. In fact, it's easier for most of us to talk about really like cardiology or problems in cardiology. But these things are very difficult to even bring attention to and to talk about them in a way that makes sense. And I'm always amazed at your ability to do that. So thank you so much.
Oh no, my pleasure. And I'm only learning and listening to you, and obviously reading what you've written. I'm only trying to explore this space because I'm curious myself, and in that if I can share what I've learned with the wider audience and the wider planet or universe, then it's obviously I'm just being a medium, and it's my absolute honor and privilege to do that. But no, thanks again, and to anyone who's listening, feel free to send us feedback and remarks, and do rate us and review us on various podcast platforms, including Apple, SoundCloud, and Spotify. And I'll see you in a couple Mondays with the Platinum episode. It's 75 episodes. I don't believe it's going to be the 75th episode the next time I have another guest. But thanks again, everyone, for tuning in.
Take care. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast, produced by Radcliffe Cardiology in association with makeadent.org. We aim to bring you a new angle of all things cardiology every second week. Review us on your favourite podcast app, or send your comments or questions to podcast@radcliffe-group.com. To view the series, head to radcliffecardiology.com/podcasts/Parallax. Thanks for listening.